So I'm continuing the rewatch of really old like 80s films with Chris, like films she's never seen and things that I haven't seen in like 20 plus years. I remember first watching Legend probably when I was it had to have been when I was like probably 16 or 17 when I first got kicked out actually. The first place I went to live, the guys I lived with were big into like fantasy and D&D, Magic the Gathering back when it was first coming out, and this was one of the films that they introduced me to, along with the Rocky Horror Picture Show, because Tim Curry is freaking fantastic. Even though his role in this film is not necessarily the biggest role, his portrayal of the devil is absolutely one of the best on-screen portrayals of the Dark One, outside of maybe Viggo Mortensen in, is it Prophecy? Man, I should review that film as well with why am I blanking? It's Eric Stoltz is in it, and Christopher Walken, and Brittany, I forget her name. Anyway, um, legend. Tom Cruise when he's like a baby. He was only like 22 or 23 years old. Mia, I'm gonna forget her name now. Sarah, it's her girl from Ferris Bueller. Early on in her career, um, the cast was obviously really good. The film itself, it's not that good of a film. It is a fun fantasy film to watch. Also, the one of the dwarves is the wizard from Willow, and I didn't know that until I just watched it this a couple days ago with Chris, and I was like, that voice sounds really familiar because we had just watched Willow like a couple of months ago. Um, Forget the bird, follow the river, you know, consult the bones. He plays one of the dwarves in here. But what this film is, I think, is a case study in like what they were trying to do in the early 80s with these weird fantasy films because the music is different. It's Ridley Scott, which to this day I feel like it's a weird film for Ridley Scott because I don't know where it fits into his overall um, catalog of films because I feel like this was before he had really established his style. I mean, obviously, what he did early on with like Blade Runner and Alien had sort of established him in that environment. But this to me feels like, and I don't know all the background about this film, I haven't dug into that. Um, but this film felt like it was kind of a jumbly mess of things compared to some of the other stuff I've seen from him. There's some really jarring edits in this film where the scenes just kind of feel out of place. The dialogue is a little wonky here and there. Overall, it is a fantasy film that I think they were using just as a vehicle for Tom Cruise, if I had to be honest with you, sort of to see if he could be a leading man in more than just, one of these other types of films. Um, I think that he does a very good. Everybody here did a good job. I mean, all of the actors. I have nothing to fault with the actors. The fault for me is in the music. The music is really jarring in places. The edits feel a little jumbled here and there, where we get these transitions where it just jumps completely in one direction or another. And then the dialogue, like the volume of the voices against like the music, is sometimes not. It doesn't feel like it's edited properly, if that makes sense. Like it's really loud in some places and really quiet in other places. So it's just like I said, it doesn't feel like the best film it could be, but it overall is a very interesting fantasy film if you're into like the 80s fantasy. Now I did say that we were watching, this along with Dragon Slayer and some other stuff. So I got the Dragon Slayer review coming out soon because we actually watched that last night. We watched this a couple nights ago, but I got sick, so I hadn't had time to review this yet. So essentially, the story is very generic. Uh, Jack, who is Tom Cruise's character, is sort of like a kid who lives in the forest. He's a forest child, and he knows magic, but he doesn't appear to be a magical creature. And then there's this princess who's a spoiled little princess who goes off into the forest because she's escaping her life as a princess, and she meets Jack and falls in love with Jack. But she's also flirtatious and not really listening to things that she should be paying attention to. And she manages to convince Jack that to take her to see this magical, mystical event, which is the unicorns. Unbeknownst to them, the devil needs the unicorn horns. He needs the unicorns dead, and he needs the horns for their magic so that he can bring about everlasting night, so that he can live and not get burnt by the sun and killed by the sun. So the overall theme is that. So Jack takes her to see the unicorns, and right away she's like, I'm not going to listen to the rules that Jack established. I'm going to run out and touch. I want to go touch one of the unicorns. And he's like, no, don't. Those aren't the rules. You're breaking the rules. And she ignores him. Whimsical princesses doing what whimsical princesses do. And as a result, one of the unicorns gets its horn chopped off and is basically slowly dying, and this causes the world to turn to ice, which is a theme we've kind of seen like in the Narnia films, is also, the White Witch and everything being icy and everything else. We've seen this in, like I said, generic fantasy tropes here. um so you got the goblin trackers and everything else, and this is another part of the film that just felt really janky to me, is that they've got, like, as an example, one of the creatures. So they've got like a goblin and this other dude, and then this guy who's all like in a helmet and everything else. And as the film progresses, you find out that that's one of the dwarves in a costume. And I was like, well, why is that necessary? What is going on here? Why did he need to be? I don't understand that. Um, there's no explanation of any of that. There's also a fairy who shows up at one point and to help guide them, and that felt a little weird. And then there's the other kid who's like an actual kind of like Puck, like an actual forest elf who helps them. And then they go in, and Jack gets a special suit of armor and a special sword, special weapons and shield and everything else to take out the bad guys. Um, and there's Tom Cruise doing early action sequences and flips and jumps and stunts and everything else. And like I said, the actors' portrayals of their characters are very well done. There's a dance sequence here which feels very similar to what we saw in Labyrinth, except we're getting it from Mia Farrow's character. And like the music, which I know was composed just for this film, it's not as bad as the synth pop of like Lady Hawk, but it still feels out of place and like overly fantastical at times. Um, and then the overuse of facial glitter is heavily prevalent in it. Like everyone has glitter on their faces at some point in time, and I still don't know what effect Ridley Scott was going for here, other than to perhaps portray that this is a magical realm, and that was their way of sort of visually displaying that everything is magical, is by having this filter of like glitter over everyone. I can't imagine what a horrific experience that must have been as an actor to like run around and constantly have glitter like glued to your face and getting in your eyes and everything else. And then the snow sequences look so evidently, the snow is so fake looking. Like they didn't bother to shoot this on location. It was obviously shot. I say obviously. If I'm wrong on this because I didn't look this up, please someone correct me in the comments below. But the snow sequences looked completely like fake snow to me. None of it looked real, especially considering, he's running around in shorts the whole time, and they're not actually cold. So it's a fun fantasy film. Tim Curry steals the show as the devil, but Tom Cruise does a very good job, I think. And all the actors did a good job. But it does feel like sort of a generic fantasy film that was pumped out to see if he was going to be able to handle the movie, and for Ridley Scott just to get a paycheck in between doing other really cool stuff that he did in the early parts of his film career. But I think compared to like Alien and Blade Runner, this is a few steps down for him. But he obviously came back swinging with like Gladiator and other stuff over the years, and Kingdom of Heaven. I like his big sword and sandal epics. I really do. And A Good Year is still one of my favorite Ridley Scott films, which has nothing to do with sword and sandals. And I think it's just a great Ridley Scott movie with Russell Crowe in it. Anyway, that's my take on Legend. Chris even complained at the end and was like, that felt kind of weird. And I was like, that's why I wanted you to watch it, because it's one of those weird, quirky 80s fantasy films that, if I had to give it a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. There were elements I liked, but a lot I didn't like. It's not something I would recommend to someone out of the blue unless they were a fan of fantasy films. But it is fun to watch if you like fantasy. So that's my take on Legend. Love to hear your thoughts. Drop them down below. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon as we review films, TV shows, and more, plus all the video game stuff we do here on the channel. Check out the playlists, join the Discord, support if you can to keep me on the air full time, super chats and memberships. See you, everybody.